Hey, Sam here with another guide for Stellaris. Today I'm going to be doing a guide for Ascension perks. I planned originally on doing a tier list. However, that didn't quite pan out, as while I made the tier list, I found a lot of these Ascension perks have hidden bonuses, and that a lot of these Ascension perks have been changed, and a lot of them are more situational, and there's no real best Ascension perk to pick. So I'm going to be covering each Ascension perk individually. The first Ascension perk I will be covering is Consecrated Worlds, which essentially it gives you the Consecrated Worlds decision. You have to be a spiritualist to access this Ascension perk, and Consecrated Worlds can increase the spiritualism for all of your pops. It also increases your amenities production and unity production, making it so that you can gain other Ascension perks earlier. This Ascension perk isn't very useful, to be honest, and it should only really be used with the Gospel of the Masses, or if you really want more spiritualist ethics. It simply doesn't do much. It's not a very good Ascension perk overall. The next Ascension perk I'll be covering is Eternal Vigilance. Eternal Vigilance gives you a 25% starbase hull points increase, a 25% starbase damage increase, a 25% defense platform damage increase, an extra 5 defense platform capacity, and to get this you have to have the Star Fortress technology. Overall, this isn't fantastic. It does make it so that your defenses are much stronger and that your stations are much stronger. I could see this being used if you were fighting against somebody who is stronger than you and you just need an edge over them. I personally don't use this one that often, but there are applications it can be used for, such as cutting off choke points more effectively, and late game using this so that Star Fortresses are still viable and still useful to some extent. The next Ascension perk is Executive Vigor. This Ascension perk wasn't very good up until recently, as they changed how edicts work. Executive Vigor essentially gives you an extra 2 edicts. This can be quite helpful, as edicts are very limiting currently with the 2.7 update, so I could see this one becoming much more frequently used. This really comes down to how much you care about edicts and if you like using them. If you find edicts to be very helpful, then this would be a great Ascension perk for you. Our next Ascension perk is Imperial Prerogative. This increases your administrative capacity by 20%. You cannot be a megacorp to use this, and overall this isn't very good, to be honest. Administrative capacity can be changed quite easily simply by using buildings, so this is, in my opinion, a waste of an Ascension perk, and I would not suggest this one unless you are using some very niche strategy that I am unaware of. The next Ascension perk is Interstellar Dominion. And this Ascension perk wasn't very good, to be honest, until the recent update, as when you declare war now and you do status quo, you only get what you have claimed. So no longer can you claim one system and take half of an empire. This means that claims are much more important and that you need to be able to claim a lot if you want to directly take systems. This perk decreases claim influence cost by 20%, and it decreases star base influence cost by 20%, giving you a lot more influence to work with. This would be very helpful if you plan on going on the offensive as a normal, non-Total War empire. It might be more viable to simply vassalize your targets and to then integrate them later on. Our next Ascension perk is Mastery of Nature, which decreases the cost to clear blockers by 33%, and it gives you access to the Mastery of Nature decision. The Mastery of Nature decision costs 2,000 energy, 100 influence, and it lasts for 360 days, 1 year, and it gives a planet an extra 2 max districts. Overall, this is quite good, but it can be pricey, so if you don't think you can afford the influence or the energy, then this might not be a good choice for you. Our next Ascension perk is an Ascension perk I don't enjoy personally. It is the Nihilistic Acquisition. To get this Ascension perk, you have to be a Gestalt Consciousness, an Authoritarian, or a Xenophobe. You cannot be a Barbaric Despoiler, as Barbaric Despoilers already have the Raiding Bombardment stance, and this Ascension perk only gives you the Raiding Bombardment stance. The rating bombardment stance does the same amount of planet damage as indiscriminate, and it does half the army damage as selective. When you kill a pop, or when you usually would kill a pop, instead of killing the pop, you gain them as population. They become a slave in your empire. Now, if you have this species set to non-desirable or displacement, then they will be killed instead of abducted. And the last 2 pops that you would have killed or abducted, you do not actually get to kill or abduct. So you have to at least kill or abduct 2 pops before you start gaining anything from this stance. Overall, I don't really see this as a beneficial perk. If you want to use Nihilistic Acquisition, you can, but it would be much easier and make a lot more sense if you simply went with the Barbaric Despoilers and got the stance anyways. It seems to be a waste of a perk for a perfectly good empire. Our next perk is one that was quite popular in the past, and that is One Vision. This decreases pop amenity usage by 10%, it increases monthly unity by 10%, and it increases governing ethics attraction by 50%. You cannot be a machine intelligence to use this. Overall, this isn't a terrible perk. I wouldn't suggest it because you are spending unity and filling an Ascension perk essentially just to get more unity and get a little bit more governing ethics attraction and a little bit less pop amenity usage. Honestly, you can do that in much better ways through other means in the game. I wouldn't waste an Ascension perk on this. You can if you are having issues with amenities or if you're having a lot of rebellions due to ethic diversity, but I wouldn't suggest this. Our next Ascension perk, Shared Destiny, is very similar to the Interstellar Dominion perk that we talked about earlier. It decreases the subject integration cost by 50%, and it increases the trust of your subjects by 100. The reason why I say this is very similar to that earlier perk is this wasn't very useful until they changed how wars work, and now this might be the quickest way to integrate new empires and get as much territory as you can quickly. Also, when you have a vassal, their military helps you in your military conflicts. So this might be the best way to expand your territory in the current meta. You cannot use this if you are a megacorp, if you are an inward perfectionist, or any genocidal empire. So this works for most empires that need this other than megacorps and inward perfectionists, but to do that you would need to be isolationist anyways. The next perk on the list, and one of my favorite, if not my favorite perk, and the one I typically pick first, is Technological Ascendancy. It's a pretty easy to understand perk. It increases your research speed by 10%, and it increases how common rare technologies are by 50%. The current meta is pops and research really determined how powerful you are, and by picking this as your first Ascension perk, you get a lot more research, and you get rare technologies faster. This means the earlier you pick this perk, the better, as the later you pick it, the less of a bonus you get from it. I personally suggest this perk highly as your first pick. I know there is some competition for the first pick, but I still suggest this as the tried and true. Our next perk is Transcendent Learning, which increases your leader level cap by 2, and it increases your leader experience gain by 50%. This is a great perk for lithoids and robotic empires, as their leaders live for quite a long time, meaning they will get a lot of benefit out of an increased level cap and an increased leader experience gain. Our next perk is the Universal Transactions Ascension perk. It decreases branch office costs by 15%, and it makes commercial pacts cost no influence. This can only be used by megacorps, and it cannot be used by criminal syndicates. This is a fantastic perk for megacorps, and I highly suggest that you pick this if you are doing a megacorp run. If you're not running a criminal syndicate and you are doing a megacorp, this should be one of your first picks. Up next is one of the strongest perks and one of the most popular currently. It is Voidborne. This has been completely reworked as they have redone habitats. To get this perk, you will need to have the research done on habitats. It increases habitat habitability by 20%. It increases habitat building slots by 2. You can upgrade your housing buildings on habitats. You can also research the next tier of habitat technology. With the rework of how habitats work, this is a very strong pick, as it makes it so habitats are much stronger than they were before the update, even though currently without this your habitats are much weaker than they were before the update. This next Ascension perk is so unpopular that the game physically lets you ban it from your games outright. It's Xeno-Compatibility, which increases your immigration pool by 33%. It increases your pop growth speed by 20% if planets have at least 2 different species, that is. You have to be a xenophile, and you have to have at least 1 xenopop living in your empire. You will also need the gene tailoring technology. This lets you make hybrid species. This causes a lot of lag and a lot of issues running the game. It slows down the game. And for most multiplayer games, this will either be banned, or if you run it, you will then become the target of every other player in the game. I never suggest this unless you have a beast of a PC, and overall, until they rework it somehow, or they figure out what's causing the issue, presumably how many different species you have, then I would not run this. This is where I'm going to cut off part 1 of the Ascension perk guide. I recorded this all in one sitting, so it is all done and complete. However, due to my internet constraints, I cannot upload a 30-minute long video. So I'm cutting this off here, as the perks going forward require at least 1 previous Ascension perk pick, and I found that that would be the easiest place to cut this video. That would make sense. If you found this part of the video helpful, think about liking and subscribing, and stay tuned for part 2.